Today, I wanted to give you a basic introduction before we go with some of the models of inventory. And I was expecting an extra class on Saturday, but somehow was suggested to have an asynchronous mode. And I hope you were able to see the slide. Well, we are into inventory management and inventory control. And we said inventory controls or management helps us achieve a satisfactory level of performance with respect to the service level that we offer to the customers, as well as minimizing the costs that are associated with the performance. Okay, and here we said keeping inventory costs within reasonable limits. So it also indicates that we know what our limits are. On the basis of the earlier discussions that we had, we realize that inventories are physical stocks of tangible items, and it occupies space, and which is valuable. And probably this is also not only used for trading, but also for production. And for this, such sort of controls and management are required for undisturbed flow of goods and undisturbed production, and to provide economies of scale of production. And it would finally be dependent on certain interrelated policies and systems, right? And in that sense, our objectives are to minimize the inventory costs, to maximize the turnover, maximize the inventory turnover. We do not want to have much of damage and waste, so we wish to minimize damage and waste while we possess the inventory, and minimize out of stock situation. We do not want to go out of stock, and minimize the costs that are associated with respect to storage or handling of these materials, and similar sort of associated costs like interest and ordering costs. Remove all those obsolescence of materials and wastage due to shelf life, and minimize the time that we require to service such sort of a need for materials. So the request for shipping. As we realize, it's a very important aspect of management, playing a very vital role in the manufacturing and merchandising. In fact, we are surprised the way a pharmacist maintains an inventory of various medicines and the systems that he follows. And any errors that we commit here not only leads to costs, but also dissatisfaction amongst the customers. And it will naturally imply financial, will have implications on the financial performance of the organization. And we need such inventory to maintain the level of customer service that we set ourselves for, to minimize costs of ordering, costs of carry, and also to have certain controls on the quantum of materials coming in, going out, and these are administrative controls for which we may have to prepare our personnel, train them, and bring in awareness about the policies that we wish to follow and the importance of following such decisions. Let me also brief you about certain minimum terminology that we would be using in course of time. Lead time, as you can see from the slide. By lead time, what we mean is the length of time between placing an order and receiving the items that we ordered for. Okay, the time interval between ordering and receiving the order. Now I place an order, and how long will it take for me to receive those materials that I have ordered is called the lead time. As the lead time increases, the inventories that we may have to hold also increases. So it has an implication on the quantum of inventories that we hold with ourselves. Carrying costs is also known as the holding costs. As the name suggests, it is the cost that has an implication based on the quantum of inventory that we hold and the time of holding such inventories. The cost to keep those inventories with us. Okay, naturally, it depends upon the quantity as well as the time period for which we hold such inventories. So these are called carrying costs. Ordering costs, carrying costs, you can understand. What is the cost of holding inventories? One is the cost of materials. Over and above this, the opportunity cost that we have on the investment that we made on these inventories, the rentals that we pay, the maintenance that it requires, the administrative costs of holding staff to keep counting and accounting for all the materials that we have, and the safety and protection of these materials that we hold to avoid any pilferage, damage, and the insurances that we may have to incur to overcome certain disasters which are beyond the control of the organization and the manpowers. So all these are included in the carrying costs. Ordering costs. Ordering costs are those that we incur in placing an order, okay? The cost of ordering and also receiving those inventories. That means to say, once I decide to purchase a particular item, I have to identify the vendors. I have to find out the vendor who supplies me the right quality of material at the right price. So the minimum of those or the best price that is offered in the market is to be acquired. Float quotations, find out the least possible or the best possible options that I have, and place an order based on the terms and conditions of the suppliers and the various other terms and conditions of supply, of quality, of cost, of credit, and the service that is rendered by the suppliers. Then the shortage costs, the cost that we incur when the demand increases beyond the supply level. That means to say, this is something intangible. Once a stockout situation happens in the market, the sort of damage that is likely to happen to recapture the market share is all that includes the shortage costs. Okay, to bring the service level, to bring up the image of the organization, to meet the expectations of the customers is all that And we have already discussed about dependent demand and independent demand. In this course of this unit, we would be dealing with independent demand. That is, demand for items which have demand independent of any other item. They do not depend. Okay. So that's what we deal with in this particular course. And I was mentioning to you, this sketch or figure that shows here. Now you can see the inventories of the timber, logs of wood held. That's the input materials. It is waiting for inspection. And the third level is waiting to be taken into the process and waiting in queue for the operator to take a particular item for processing. Then the operator makes adjustment for his machine for performing the operations on the raw materials, and finally it comes. So as you see, almost 95% of the time, the material is held in the inventory part of it is just held as a idle stock, and only 5% is the runtime or the processing time. So for this, we have to incur so much of carrying costs and so on. So all this depends on what we do. So the waiting time, the job is waiting to be moved. Everything is explained with respect to the time and material flow. Have a keen observation of this from the input to the output side based on the cycle of operations that we have. So having said this, now we have already discussed the reasons to carry inventory, what happens when you have too much of inventory, and if you have too little of inventory. This we have discussed in the last class: increased overhead costs, increased carrying costs, increased risk of loss of market value, decreased inventory flexibility, and increased inventory shrinkages. Similarly, if you have too little inventory, it increases the risk of lost sales, lost customers, increased ordering costs, increased supplier price increases, or increased exposure to non-delivery, and decreased bulk order discounts. These are some of the things that we had to. Well, a manager should operate the levels of inventory which is optimal, not excess, not less. Okay. So how he does it depends upon certain points, and it helps the organization to reduce its costs, to ensure uninterrupted process, and eliminating unnecessary work and minimizing wastages. Also, effective utilization of materials and floor space, and possibility of being able to forecast better and avoid unnecessary investment or underinvestment in the inventories. Well, as we said, excess inventory consumes funds, and it means opportunity cost also. We could have made use of these funds which are locked into the inventory better to gain profit for the organization or reduce cost for the organization. It not only increases cost of storage, but also other incidental costs of transportation, insurance. And once you have overstock, if you are overstocked, then identifying materials of necessity probably is a difficulty. Overcrowding of the store leads to operational difficulties. And disadvantages of not having enough inventory is you go out of stocks, high risk of liquidity. And going out of stock is only affecting the production process or production flow, material flow, and organization cannot meet our commitments to the market, delivery commitments, and naturally, we would not be able to satisfy our customers' demand. And as we see, it also depends upon the channels of distribution that we have. We have different types of costs that would be also associated. The picture shows a typical supply chain that is associated, as we have narrated before, whether you have a single level or a double level. How do you do this? And here, when we are converting these materials into finished materials and trying to ship it to the market through the distribution centers, this is how it implies. And now the first unit is the raw materials, which are being processed, taking it to the work in process. So we incur production or purchase costs at this point of time. And once we do this, once we complete this particular product, we have to ship it to our distributors or warehouses or customers directly. Now, one of the line that is shown on the top of this chart is a bypass. If you are not, it's a one level or two level, whether you have distributors followed by retailers and to the customers, or directly from distributors, or even from the production to these customers. Okay. So those are all goods in transport or goods in transit. So, but they are all finished goods, which not only incurs value, which has value for itself, already invested by the organization, but also incurs the distribution costs or transportation costs on this. And we, in addition to this, we have warehousing costs, inventories of warehousing, so on and so forth, to be supported. So, as the levels of distribution increases, the costs also are likely to come up. Let us see some of the typical costs that we come across, the various things as we already discussed, the inventory costs. Basically, we can classify them as ordering costs, carrying costs, stocking costs, or stock out costs. Okay. These costs, having an idea about these costs is important while making decisions that affect the inventory size. Not only the size, the following costs that we have shown here have to be understood in the perspective of the cost minimization. And let us try to see what we have to consider in order to optimize some of these costs. For example, the ordering costs. Ordering costs are costs for placing orders and expecting some inspection to take place. We have to incur certain clerical costs on this and processing of our own inquiries and the offers, the expression of interest expressed by the vendors to find out what is the best opportunity that we have. So calculating the such matters requires clerical assistance, administrative assistance. So to prepare such a sort of a purchase order, and after receiving it, we have to count the items, calculate the order quantities, and keep tracking of what is happening with the orders so that we are never in a situation where the flow stops or the stock out situation happens. Here we have written ordering costs include inspection, inspection section cost, cost of stationery, cost of tenders, so on and so forth. Then coming to the carrying costs. Carrying costs are also, as we have said, is termed as holding cost, which includes the cost for storage facilities, handling facilities, insurance, pilferage, obsolescence, taxation that we are likely to incur, depreciation on the materials. So high holding costs naturally would imply better have low inventory levels. And when we have low inventory levels, naturally, the replenishment or the purchase frequency has to be high. So the replacement has to be very frequent. So that we have to realize the implications of having low carrying costs. In addition to this holding costs and the ordering cost, we also have the purchase cost, which is inclusive of the price paid or the labor that we incur for the materials and the overhead charges that we have to pay in order to produce the item that we are proposing to do. So these are ordering costs, the purchase cost, the material cost basically that we have to incur. And the shortage cost is something, or the stock out cost as we call it. When the stock of a particular item is depleted, then the order for that item must either wait until the stock is replenished, or we have to cancel that. It may not be possible to estimate the loss of profit during this particular period, the effect of lost customers or the penalties because of non-satisfying commitment, not being able to satisfy the commitments that we have made. In addition to all this, the damage that the image of the organization is likely to come up with. So all these are linked up with, some of them are intangible as well, the shortage costs. Okay. Then the factors affecting the volumes of inventories, as we have been trying to understand, it is the resources that are available, availability of finance, the discounts that are allowed by the suppliers, the cost that we incur for processing every time to place an order, the space that is available for us, and the cost of space that we may have to incur, and risk of loss due to the price fluctuations. The prices are not stable. Prices keep fluctuating. So depending on this, it may also have. And the economic order quantity, the optimized costs that we incur as an organization. And also the lead time or the time to obtain the goods after placing an order for them. Okay. Then we also said, because of some of the costs, like carrying costs, cost of customer responsiveness, cost of coordinating production, cost of diluted return on investment, reduced capacity costs, large lot quantity costs, quality costs, and cost of production problems, we probably do not wish to get into holding more than required inventories. So these are some of the disadvantages of having excess or less inventory. So we realize that we have to maintain some optimal levels, if not, the adequate levels of inventory. So it is a tightrope walk for the manager who manages this. And he is expected to perform all this sort of controls and for which you need to have some sort of guidance and policies to stay with. So the systematic control over such sort of procurement, storage, and usage of material with a view to maintain continuous flow of materials within the organization and avoiding excessive investment is basically what inventory control is all about. So inventory control means controlling materials lying within the stores, and it keeps continuous track of inventories also. And a system is a set of policies and controls that monitor the levels of inventory and determines what levels should be maintained, when stock should be replenished, and how large the order should be. So the decisions that we need to make in this context are what levels should be maintained, when stocks should be replenished, when to buy, how much to buy. So how large should the order be placed? So we will be coming up with some of the models this afternoon. Now, when we have a regular class, I wish to take you through some of the models that we have and the decisions that we are likely to come up with, where to place the store and why, the materials, and what to store there and why, how much of an item to be stored and why, how to find and keep track of what is stored, and how much safety stock should be stored and why, how long before really placing an order should we decide, and what is the minimum or the maximum of quantity of each item. We have to decide so many things about ordering. We have discussed already about the cost. Some of these items just go through holding costs or costs associated with holding or carrying inventories. It includes costs related to storage such as insurance, extra staffing, interest, and so on. Some examples are building rent and depreciation, building operating costs, taxes. Ordering costs, the cost of supplies, order processing, clerical costs. The ordering cost is valid if the products are purchased, not produced internally. And setup cost is very similar to sometimes they are treated on. Setup cost is adjusting a machine for a particular variety to be processed. The cost of preparing a machine for manufacturing an order. Setup cost is highly correlated with setup time, and machines that traditionally have taken long hours to set up are now being set up in less than a minute by employing FMS and CIM systems. Now, these are all computer related today. So, computer integrated manufacturing systems and reducing setup times is an excellent way to reduce inventories. Well, we will be talking about the independent demand all divide. And the models that we have would consist of demand for an item is either dependent or independent. So we said we are interested in independent demand. For example, demand for refrigerators is independent for demand for cars, but demand for auto tires is certainly dependent on the demand for cars. We will deal with the independent demand situation. And in the dependent demand situation, we use material resource planning or requirement planning systems, MRP, which will be dealt in a different course. Okay, so that's all for now. We'll meet in the afternoon. Thank you.